I was the second class to ever graduate computer science. A lot of people thought I was making a mistake, actually. They thought I should go into medicine. We had to choose between multiple countries. We chose Ireland.
Then you flip it and you move to HubSpot, which from the outside I see as a place with empathy, so much empathy from the top down in terms of leadership and how teams work together.
I absolutely love it. I feel I have leaders I look up to.
Chat GPT and the way the world is going, and I know Dharmesh talks a lot about it, and you know it's going to play such an important and vital role. But what do you think in terms of ChatSpot and the importance it's going to play in HubSpot's strategy going forward?
Great questions.
Nadia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Martin.
Great to have you.
Great to be here as well.
I'd like to go back in time and give us some context on yourself being in Syria, going to Tishrin University, and what actually brought you into software engineering.
So I don't share that often. I was born actually a Palestinian refugee in Syria. Usually I just say I come from Syria, but I was born a refugee, and I was a refugee for all of my life in Syria. And you know, when you grow up as a refugee, you learn that education is your asset, is really what you have in life. So I grew up, I knew I was going to do something in engineering, probably. Didn't know what it was going to be like, but I always liked to, you know, when a toy broke, it was a favorite pastime to just disassemble the electric parts. I really just enjoyed building things and trying to understand how they work. And then in my mid-teens, it was when computers were starting to become a thing a little bit in, you know, some places. And my parents decided to during summer, just to put me to learn how to use a computer, just basically like using just how to use it. And I was so fascinated. I was like, this is amazing. It blew my mind away. It was a terrible course. They would have us play they would put a video game, it's like, go play. And, you know, everyone was enjoying that. And I liked the video games, but I would just say, take the person teaching us aside, like, how does this work? And what's behind all of this? What is making this machine work? And he didn't have a lot of the answers, but he told me, you probably should, you should probably study something to do with this. But it didn't exist at the time. You see, there was no computer science degree at the time, no internet in my country. But still, I just was hoping by the time I would get to college age, they will exist. A year before I got into the time to go into college education, that discipline was created in my country. I was the second class to ever graduate computer science.
Yeah.
And I just loved it, you know. A lot of people thought I was making a mistake, actually. They thought I should go into medicine or should go study something else. I remember a lot of people discouraging me from it, but I just knew that is it. That's what I wanted to do. And, you know, I believe that was the right decision for me.
You stuck to it.
Yeah.
It seems that you always had that natural curiosity and asking the question why and wondering how things were built. I
just really enjoyed it. You know, I studied in, government university. I mean, there's no, not much of a choice when you're in a country like Syria. There's literally 4 colleges and government ones. And it's good. If you get in the government ones, you mean you have the grades to get there. It's very competitive. You go to private ones, it means you can pay for it versus get the right education. So I got into Tishrin one, which is in my hometown. And honestly, I mean, the education was good, but I spent most of the time trying to study on my own. And again, we're talking before internet. So I would get CDs on like how to learn certain programming languages, and they were awful. I would get books and they were poorly translated from English, and it was awful as well. So it took a while. I actually didn't get internet until maybe 3rd year. We had dial-up. It existed in the country, but it was like a whole, my parents were afraid to get us internet. Yeah, it was really interesting times. By the time I graduated, we were still on dial-up. I actually worked remotely. I was a teaching assistant, but I worked remotely as well on dial-up. I still wonder sometimes how I managed to work remotely. We're talking here like when it was so slow, as I would be typing in the remote terminal, I'm seeing every character show up one at a time. It was so slow, so terrible. But it just made it work. So I remember studying Python. I was just so interested. I had internet at the time, so I started learning Python tutorials. I was really intrigued about the language. And it was what landed me the remote job I mentioned. So there was like this startup by actually a Google employee at the time. So he created a startup. Not the most. He was trying to make a social network. It was a time where Facebook was probably its infancy. It was not a successful social network. In fact, it never really saw the light. But I worked there for a year. And at that time, I was honestly still trying to figure out where, I'm going into more, getting a PhD, going more into that route, or going more into my career in like working in a company. And just life took me to Ireland in the end. So my husband got an offer from Google. We had to choose between multiple countries. We chose Ireland. And it was the best decision we have made. And I moved to Ireland. I was still working with that startup. And then I applied. I saw a job posting from Demonware, which was a subsidiary of Activision. And they said they wanted a Python programmer. So I was like, that's me. I applied. I did really well in the interview. There were not many Python programmers at the time. Even Demonware was trying to switch people to Python. So I remember even in the interview, one of the interviewers was telling me, I didn't know you could do that in Python. So I just was really, I feel like that learning on the side really helped me get my first opportunities. And I started from there. I stayed there for almost 11 years before moving to HubSpot.
Oh my God, that's unheard of for a software engineer to stay 10 years with one company these days almost.
Yeah, it's a lot of time. In video games, though, it's pretty common for people. So I was working with people who've been there for 20 years, sometimes 30 years, all their careers in video games. Not so much in maybe the technical side, but it was not unheard of. I was definitely not that shocked. The people were not that shocked to see me as long. But honestly, what kept me that long is that there was always something different, a new challenge. I started as a mid-level engineer, worked my way gradually into a senior director. So we're talking every year, couple of years, there was a new role, new challenge, new project. So it never felt the same at the time. So it was always something new to learn, a new challenge to put myself in. And that's the same thing I feel in HubSpot. I've been in HubSpot now for 4 years, and every year is very different. So that's really what keeps me motivated, is challenging myself with something different.
Yeah, making sure you don't stagnate and that you're constantly being challenged. At Activision, you worked on the Call of Duty franchise. How did that impact your career? That must have been amazing.
So I was and still am into video games. It's actually one of the things that got me interested is it's a common story. You're fascinated by how, even at the time when computers were so new, video games were amazing. We're like magic. How does that work? So I was very curious. So it was not a coincidence I got into Demonware to work on online services for video games. So that was definitely a point of interest to me. Working on a game like Call of Duty is really interesting. I don't know if many people realize the scale of these games. We're talking here, like some of the Call of Duty launches were among the biggest launches of entertainment media in the world. Like we're talking here, you talk about Avatar and the revenue from Avatar Call of Duty, some of the Call of Duty releases made much more.
Yeah.
We're talking here about, you see the credits, you'll have to wait for like maybe 20 minutes to see all the credits. So there's a lot, there's huge effort that goes behind every one of those games. And what that means is that, especially for a game like Call of Duty, where there's millions and millions of players, you launch it in a specific date that is predetermined in advance. And a lot depends on getting that launch right. You cannot have an outage. You can ruin the whole launch. If you have an outage at a critical moment, you ruin the experience. You may never get that peak back. And that was very essential. That was my job, is we specialize in building the online infrastructure, the online services that powered the online experience of Call of Duty. So we're talking matchmaking, how to connect players around the world to have the best experience together, how to log into the game, how to create a team, your leaderboard score. Later, we had, my teams had we have the marketplace in game to purchase microtransactions. We're talking millions of transactions and a lot of revenue flowing. So if you have an outage, we know that it didn't only cut the revenue, reduced it, it never made it up. Like when you restore the service, you don't make the money you've lost. So it cost a lot of money. So a lot of pressure was on those launches. And the dates never changed, but the requirements did. So that meant operating in a high pressure, high stake environment. Like you remember in more senior roles, I had the game studios were my customers. So I would go meet up with them. They wanted to test my mettle. They wanted to know I got what it takes, that they can have their confidence in me. So it'd be like, are you sure this new matchmaking algorithm is not gonna fail on us? Like, are we, we're talking here about hundreds of millions, at stake here. Would you put your job on the line? And yes, you would have to put your job on the line. And it was part of my job to do that and be responsible for it. The thing is, though, you would be responsible for it if it fails, not if it succeeds, because after all, it's the studio who built the game. I didn't build the game.
Yeah.
So basically it was, you just need to not make a mistake. You really could not make a mistake. And, when there were outages, we'd see Twitter would go buzz with people, players being angry. Sometimes it would leak that Demonware is fixing the outage. So I remember seeing articles, we should all get axed because of an outage.
No pressure at all.
No pressure whatsoever, yeah.
Oh my God, that must have drove a very, would you say a competitive environment or a competitive culture?
Absolutely. But, this is how Activision operates. Some companies, so Activision operates on the independent studio model and built-in competition. So the way Activision operate with efficiency is by driving internal competition between the studios to drive costs down. So you either make it or you're sacked. You get laid off. They did layoffs for basically, it was a business process. It's a regular, overhire layoff. So you either prove yourself. So if you're a game studio, you don't make something successful, you're not gonna survive. And they would either, they would buy the studio, work for a few years, until they're not longer profitable, either put them to work on Call of Duty Assist. So multiple studios actually worked on Call of Duty, not a single one. If not, then they would either resell it to another publisher or just lay off everybody. And for me in Demonware, we would always be definitely being told, you could be replaced, right? So, either you're going to be efficient, do it on time, be less expensive, or we'll find something else. Reality is there was no competition really, because we did our job really well. But that always existed. So it definitely was a trial by fire at times, but prepares you for anything. But it's definitely a business model. Not sure I would agree with it, but it did work for Activision.
Yeah, no, definitely. Was there a specific moment in those 10 years where you proved to yourself, like, I can really stand my ground here, as you say, when they test your metal?
I would not have survived or gone to the levels I've gone into becoming a senior director if I didn't do that. It was, I remember there was an internal leadership program for potential talent, and it was called Lead at Studio. So they got people who thought they could be future studio leadership. So I was in one of those classes, and I remember the head of Worldwide Studio at the time, he was telling us about what it takes to succeed in the company. He said, you need to have a charge the hell attitude. You need to prove you got it. And if we notice any weakness, if you notice that you are afraid, then we're gonna think you don't have it, and therefore you're gonna be grilled more. Remember him talking about meetings where an exec ran away crying or whatever. Like there was like that kind of. So I remember I was in a meeting with that exact person who taught me that, and we got head to head on an issue, and he was grilling me on the fact that over the past few years, our headcount has increased. I knew that the studio he was running at the time, also headcount has increased, in fact, doubled over the same period. So I asked him, I told him, well, has your headcount then stayed the same over the same period? And he told me, I see what you're doing here, and I don't like. He really got upset. But he did say, okay, like he said, all right, I see where your expense is coming from, but you better watch it, you know. So it was like, I remember leaving the meeting and my coworkers giving me high fives and like, oh yeah, you told it to them and
you were
so
the hero.
on. But you know, I hated it. It was actually after that meeting that I thought to myself, I don't know if I want to be in a place like this. I don't want to win like this.
Yeah.
It was really not the way I wanted to operate. There is another example I wanna share. It was from a similar period where we launched a very unique matchmaker algorithm, and Call of Duty, the Call of Duty studio was hesitant to adopt it, and they feared because getting the matchmaking experience right, it was very essential. So I remember at the time there was a lot of fear going back and forth, and I remember telling them that I will make sure it will not fail. It's on me, and will succeed. That will be proven. So we'll show them during the period leading to the launch that will prove that it will lead to a better player experience. And we did, and it was a very, very successful launch. A lot of people enjoyed that matchmaking experience. We don't really get the credit for it. Like I said, if it did fail, though, it would have been a big problem. But I was really proud of the team that pulled it off, and that's what it took to really make it happen.
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, your mettle was tested, but you proved yourself time and time again.
But it was very stressful. Like I said, it was not a healthy environment. But you know, sometimes, you know, it can make you stronger, but it was really what made me decide that it is not the right environment I wanted to be in. DeepWare itself was a great place to be. It was really more the dealing with the outside corporate.
Yeah, it doesn't sound in terms of a collaborative environment, but then you flip it and you move to HubSpot, which from the outside I see as a place where, well, in terms of leadership, it seems like empathy, so much empathy from the top down in terms of leadership and how teams work together.
Absolutely. You know, I was, when I was interviewing at HubSpot, I was interviewing the company as well. And it's funny, I was really picky. I was telling myself, if I'm going to move, I really want to make sure I'm choosing the right place this time. So, and HubSpot sounded too good to be true. So it really just, everyone seemed to love it. everyone was so passionate and excited and attentive and empathetic. And, you know, I interviewed with some other companies, didn't even want to proceed when I felt that, if someone seemed to hate what they're doing, why would I want to work there? But I got the impression in people have thought that really loved it. But I was so cynical at the time. I thought to myself, if it was half as good as it seemed in the interview, then it's already fantastic. So let me go for it. And it turned out to be all it seemed to be and more. So here I am 4 years later, and I absolutely love it. I feel I have leaders I look up to. They're people that I would proud to work with, proud to work for. I am, I love this place.
Brilliant. So completely different culture to obviously
Yeah,
last company.
I was led to believe you need to really put everyone under stress and competition to get right efficiency and focus. But I realized that empathy gets you a lot more. Hiring for people who actually care about the customer. So a core part of what we do when we interview people in HubSpot is we test how much they sense ownership to the customers, what their attitude, what their values are. So our HubSpot value, we short it as HEART. So humble, empathetic, adaptable, transparent, and remarkable. And it's really, we live it. We absolutely live it. And I do believe that's really a better way to have an efficient, successful company is hiring for that, and it just ensuring you really think for the customer, you really feel it, you have that empathy, you really care, and that works much better.
Brilliant. And I know you don't like to brag, but I know you probably win manager awards and do so well. So what is it that gets the best out of your staff and the people that you manage? Can you pinpoint it in terms of your leadership traits?
So, throughout my career, I have learned what not to do as a manager, sometimes more than what to do. Now, I had really good managers. I'm not saying I had awful ones, but I've interacted with people who worked, like I said, with fear, with stress, and I knew at the time what I didn't want as an employee and what I wanted. So when I moved to HubSpot as well, I really applied these things. So I wanted to really care personally about the people that work with me. But I wanted them to know that I care. So, the difference between I care versus they know I care. And the other part is I wanted to hold them to a high bar, but I wanted them to know that I'm holding them to a high bar. That's the difference. They needed to know that. So to me, I would be successful if they knew I care about them personally and that I also hold them to a high bar to help them achieve their objectives. And that these two things together is really what I believe made me a better manager over time. I have worked with, I have an amazing team, and the constant thing they tell me is push me harder. Like I want to, tell me where I can do better. But it's always in the context of helping them grow, not that you're failing. It's like, how can you, what's, I talk to them about what their objective, like what do they want to get out of their career? And that's what I'm here for. I'm helping them achieve their objective there, and they appreciate it. So combining this together is really, in my opinion, what makes a manager a good one.
Yeah, it's the combination of empathy, but also holding them to the higher standards that works. And I know we're talking about people, but now on the flip side, in terms of Chat GPT and the way the world is going, and I know Dharmesh talks a lot about it, and it's going to play such an important and vital role. But what do you think in terms of ChatSpot and the importance it's going to play in HubSpot strategy going forward?
Great question. So first of all, I wanna explain something just to set the context here. So HubSpot, we build a CRM platform for scaling companies, right? So we build that in HubSpot, and the idea is to offer a scaling company everything they need to run their business and provide the best service for their customers. And my role is currently, so I'm a VP of engineering for Marketing Hub. And Marketing Hub is where we provide everything you need to run your marketing business. So to me, when I heard about new generative AI tech, and that would have been sometime during the pandemic, actually, maybe early pandemic even, where I started to get more aware of some of the what's going on, what OpenAI is working on, what's going on there. And immediately I realized this is transformative. This is going to be huge. This was before it was still more in tighter circles, I would say. Like, it was not like a common, everyone is aware of what's going on. And I was immediately intrigued because so there's obviously applications for this everywhere. For marketing use cases, it's absolutely transformative. We know, we deal with, again, scaling companies. So often you're a marketer there, you're wearing multiple hats. You're not usually, the marketing teams is actually not a fast growing team. You're usually, so, if you're in sales, there's usually the sales team scale up much more quickly with the company. That's not the case for marketing. So when we talk to our customers, the biggest thing is they are doing so much as a one person or two people or a very small team. They're the social media manager. They are the one who are writing the mail, the marketing emails. They're the ones that are writing the posts. They're trying to do everything. They're putting their strategy together, and it's such a hard job, and it's hard to get the credit as well for what you do. So seeing a technology that can really transform how you do it, can make it a lot easier for you to scale, was absolutely fascinating to me. So I immediately started researching it more, and I wrote a memo internally about it, and we need to invest in this area. And internally, people were just as intrigued as I am. So there was still some risk. OpenAI was still, they weren't able at the time, we're talking about, they're still building up their models and maturing them. If you're a company, you want to build a relationship, you want to make sure that they are going to be respecting GDPR, privacy policies. They're going to wipe data, they're not going to store stuff. There's a lot of things you need to make sure that you're protecting customers. So that takes a while. Meanwhile, though, we still needed to experiment, make sure, prove this is going to work. So a lot of things happened behind the scenes. And you talk about ChatSpot. I still remember the time where Dharmesh reached out to show me a demo. He wanted to show a demo of ChatSpot internally. And at the time, he was working about it secretly for several months. So he did a demo, I think it was in January. Or maybe, late January, I think, or maybe early February. He was working on it since November. And he did that demo, and I was so fascinated. I was like, this was a use case. So we had already built a big use case list. There's also things you could do with this technology. We're not talking about just, by the way, GPT, but also generative AI in general, stable diffusion, generating images, generating videos, generating audio, understanding visual input. But the transformative nature of it in providing a text interface was something we thought it was possible in theory, but Dharmesh's demo is what demonstrated it could be done in reality.
That's brilliant. How do you think it will affect or even change the way that we work and communicate with each other?
So what I will tell you is it's going to change how we communicate with our applications. So it wouldn't change everything you do with a machine, but think about it this way. So some people imagine you were going to do a task If you're gonna do it on an app, you're gonna say you wanna add a note next to someone's contact details. So you're gonna search for that contact, open the record, find the field where you can add notes and add the note. That's fine. Think if you're talking to an assistant and you're going to ask them to do the same thing. You're not going to tell them, okay, go open the record, search, open the field. You're going to say, hey, would you add a note to Nadia's account to say, we met at the conference on that date.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you can do with GPT, because it understands what you're telling it. It understands the context, it understands the logic, and with the utilizing it the right way, you can translate that request into the prerequisite steps to execute it into the application. And that's what ChatSpot can do for you. And that is transformative. So some people think, oh, well, I'm not going to use text to do some things, but you do actually do it day to day. Think of Slack and how you interact with a lot of your coworkers and how you interact with people around you. You say, hey, can I see the sales report broken by quarter? Someone go and produce it. Well, now you can do that as you were searching. You write that and it will generate it for you via that interface. So absolutely, it changes things, but it changes how you interact with the machine for that purpose.
Yeah, there's so many, as you say, benefits to it. What do you believe are the potential risks of using AI and chatbots, especially in, let's say, customer service support, even marketing roles?
So it has a lot of power. As a customer, I want to get what I want to get done efficiently. So I don't care if it's done via a bot or a person, as long as it gets done. Bots get a bad rap before because they were not as good. Like it's known. You get a bot and you're gonna find a way to get out of interacting with it as quickly as possible to just get a human at the end of the line. But we don't think as much when it actually does do the job for you. For example, you want to do, the other day I wanted to do an Amazon return, and I got the bot and I said, hey, I want to return. So I was like, which item? I click on the items, like, okay, what's the reason? Give the reasons, like, okay, return processed. And it's done. I don't need to talk to someone. I don't need to wait for someone. Bots don't get tired. They don't get emotional. They don't get bored. So they're going to get the job done. So if you actually make them more efficient, that's brilliant for me as a customer. Now, when you talk about the risk, it can be misused. So right now, the technology, it's prone to what's called hallucination. So what I mean here is if you ask GPT or Chat GPT a question, sometimes they can make up facts, especially if you make up some. So if you tell it, okay, I remember, like, just, play around with it a lot. Tell me about the Third World War, it's going to make it up.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes they could tell you it doesn't exist, but if you push it hard enough and you say, no, it existed, it just makes it up. Because it's what it does, it's predicting what's the logical answer to a question. Not that the answer is correct. It's just that it's a plausible answer. It's possible. So obviously the risk is that if people are prone to believing anything they read, that they can also read that and believe it. If it's not, they don't check it. But to me, honestly, this is no different than talking to any person. You always need to verify your facts. So It's not something that would scare me. It's also possible that some people over time, they're gonna mistake it to be to have real emotions and build emotional attachments to bots. That's already happening, and obviously that someone is suffering from mental illness, that could definitely be a risk factor that as a society we need to be aware of.
Yeah. Do you think there needs to be legal or regulatory frameworks put in place to ensure the ethical side of AI and chatbots?
That is already being done. I'd say, as always, governments are lagging behind tech, so they're rushing now to put the right frameworks in place. I remember reading they're talking about restricting access if you're younger than 13 in age. There are talks about also ensuring the sources of the data it's reutilizing. The thing is, like, OpenAI, they're saying that the data the model is trained on data available on the public internet. But that could also include people's private information just being out in the public. So there is also some questions about, it's a bit of a gray area with GDPR, because it's not that the data is stored in the model, it's trained on it. It's not stored in it, it's trained on it. So, but because it's trained on it, it can reconstruct it. So is this violating GDPR or not? That's why you see some European countries already banning it. I think we're just going to have this battle between tech and regulations, and eventually it'll settle and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, there's always that. There's always that fear, as you say, especially coming from the government side. What about your own engineering org? Let's say engineers are using GitHub's Copilot or Chat GPT to write code at work. What would your thoughts be on that?
So we haven't enabled that at work right now in HubSpot, but we're looking into it. To me, in my personal time, when I code, I do use it. I'm using Chat GPT to generate when I write a script, and it saves me tons of time. I absolutely would say a lot. I've talked to many engineers, and none of us are afraid of it replacing our jobs. I know that's a common thing. The way that is talked about is, to me, this is just we're getting a better tool. We're having a tool that would help us do our job better. So I definitely would be supportive of us using it, utilizing it. What you need to, though, make sure if you're a company, use it before you use any tech like this, to ensure that that legally everything is right. Like, you want to check, for example, what's the license of the code that Copilot is trained on. You want to check there's not going to be any question of, so if it's generating code, who owns that code? There's obviously some of those questions that, as a company, that you want to make sure you're doing everything right. You're going to want to check. So obviously that would be what can slow down a company just enabling Copilot. But I'm pretty sure sooner or later that's going to be something that most companies will adopt, as long as the license part is ensured that it's done right.
Yeah. In terms of job opportunities, let's just say the quality assurance engineer or the tester, the QA tester, should they be looking over their shoulders, thinking, if software engineers are writing code and perhaps using ChatGPT, will they be needed in the future?
So over time, humans have adapted to many changes. Steam engine, I'm sure, have changed some jobs' nature. To me, this is about improving the tools we use. So yes, it will change the nature of what you do, but as humans, we do adapt. To me, if I am a QA engineer, I would be using this tool. If I am a writer, I would use it as well. I use ChatGPT in my day-to-day all the time. I use it to, when I'm writing, actually when I write memos and stuff, I make it, review the clarity of it, maybe rephrase certain things. If I'm brainstorming ideas, I can ask her questions and have a nice brainstorming session, just like someone that can hear to all your wild ideas and help you think about them. It's brilliant. I really love it. So to me, I think taking the engineer's example, and that I've never talked to an engineer that is afraid of the tool. I've talked to many of them. They're all excited about it. No one is afraid that it's going to replace us. To us, it's like, it's going to take the boring parts of the job out, the repetitive part. It's going to help us find solutions quicker. It really cannot replace you completely as an engineer. And honestly, if it replaces certain parts, we'll just move to other parts. We can always adapt.
Yeah, as you say, it's a brilliant tool to use. Do you foresee that there might be an impact in terms of privacy or data security when it comes to AI chatbots?
So as I'm saying, there is currently a lot of questions around what if the data that the model is being trained on, is it so just because it's public, does that give a company the right to process it and train the model and then ability then to use that for profit? So there's questions obviously about it. Now, in terms of using it though, if you're using the tool for privacy, OpenAI already talks about, data gets wiped after a certain amount of days, and they have a lot of like reassurances about privacy of the data that you use to enter to give the model. I wouldn't give it my, bank information, etc. You always want to be careful. I'm more afraid of it though is being utilized in the wrong hands. So imagine scams. Now you can scale your scams.
Yeah.
You don't need now to have scammers do you. What you can do is just you can make your bots smarter, and then wait until someone take the bait, and then deal with that individually. So you can really scale your operations, and so that is definitely
Yeah.
a risk, right? So then you can also use it to farm people's information as well, trick them to give you their information, all sort of bad uses, but that can happen with any tool.
Yeah, it's like the creation of the internet. There's always going to be the positives and the negatives with anything. Do you feel, I guess, AI will enhance education and learning?
I think it's a great educational tool. I do think that, so, one of the things about education or our education in general, and I'm talking every education system I've interacted or dealt with, teaches people that you trust what you read, right? With textbooks, you trust it. You don't, and I remember growing up learning a lot of misconceptions and misinformation that turned out not to be true over time. I believe there is a benefit in teaching children that not everything you read is true. You need to verify. So that, and having a conversational style of learning is really valuable. Now, I do believe, though, at this stage, the best way to use the technology would be with supervision and would be to utilize it to find you the right information, provide citations, rather than just ask a question and let it give you whatever. This is how how Microsoft has done their chatbot with Bing, is that it's like more of an assisted search, right? So you search for something. If it summarizes what fine, you can answer some questions, but always cite it back to a source. Now, that source could be lying still. So that's why it's sending you to the source, and you can then validate your facts.
Yeah. It's such an interesting time. Even when I think of yourself, if you could rewind back to Tishreen University in Syria and not working off dial-up and having the assistance of AI and Chat GPT, do you think it's a crazy thought to have, isn't it? The difference.
It's definitely, I think, so if you talk to someone specializing in ML, they'll tell you this technology is not new. I mean, new-ish, but we've been, in the past decade, it's been progressing. In the past 5 years, it's been progressing. People in the right circles were aware of it. They're aware of those advances. But what made it, what I tell people, what actually made the leap is making it available to the public. Google had the technology for years. Google had their own bots, and they had that technology for years, but they were afraid of putting it in the public. They were afraid of embarrassment because there were many failed bots. We've always heard those stories of, the bot released by this company became racist 24 hours later or spout nonsense. So they were afraid of releasing the tech. OpenAI approach of just putting it out there with the disclaimer that it's going to be inaccurate. And it was a leap in technology, but still made mistakes, but they took the risk. And then the fact that they made their APIs available to any company, any business, any person, that is the leap. Before, that technology would have been only available to tech giants. So if you're not one of the tech giants, you cannot utilize it. And it's in their hand, and they can choose to not. If they don't know how to monetize it, they're not going to put it out.
Yeah.
And the fact that OpenAI put it out there forced them all to start rushing. This is why they're all rushing to then, they missed their chance. That's really what is interesting, the fact that it's out there. So this is why it's so transformative. And I don't think we've seen the end of it. This is like an equivalent of a moon race here.
Yeah. No, it is crazy times. Do you feel, as you say, these leaders of tech giants now feeling maybe they missed out on the start of it, and they're asking for a pause on AI for 6 months or 12 months? Do you feel that's more them thinking,
that was
damn,
such a desperate move? It was so funny seeing that pause. I mean, I don't know what they're talking about here. A lot of fear mongering, a lot of people being afraid. The reality is they are afraid. They have the reason to be afraid. They're afraid for their bottom line.
Yeah.
And they should be. Right? If you, they missed their chance to, because I'm speculating here, but, Google probably couldn't figure out how to monetize it. They make their money through ads. How do you monetize a chatbot like this? They don't really operate in a per use, a model like OpenAI. So that was definitely not to end consumers anyway. It's not really their it's not that interesting to them. So this, I'm sure they're panicking. So we'll see. I'm expecting we're going to see a lot of advances until we hit a wall. So eventually we'll probably hit a technological wall where the technology, we're just gone as far as we can get with this type of technology.
Yeah.
But we're far from that, and who knows then if we can take the next leap from there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's an interesting watch, and you must be very excited to be part of it, and
Very, yeah. I'm really, as an engineer, I play with the API myself. I use it day to day. Like I said, I think you definitely want to use it. The chat, so Chat GPT, I have the free access because I was signed up in time, but I actually use the playground, so which like the one you have if you're a developer, and that is available for a very, very cheap fee. You can have access to all the tools, and you can see how it works in practice. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not infallible. One of my favorite first conversation with GPT-4 after its launch was asking it about the difference between GPT-4 and GPT-3. And it told me, well, GPT-4 have not launched yet. And I told it, well, you are based on GPT-4 model.
Yeah.
And it said, no, I'm sorry, I am not based on GPT. I'm sorry, you're very wrong. It has not launched yet. Like, okay, if you say so.
That's one thing, obviously, just as you say, questioning the information and like before citing the source. How I usually wrap up the podcast is a couple of quick fire questions.
Sure.
If you're ready for that. So my first one would be something you wish you did earlier in your career.
I wish I learned to stand up for myself earlier. I always spoke up, but more for others than myself. And I was under the impression that if you just do everything well, people will see it, recognize you for it, and you don't need to say anything.
Yeah.
But I was wrong. So I learned to stand up for myself better over time, but I definitely wish I'd done so before.
Okay. Do you have a biggest failure or something that keeps you up at night?
So my understanding of the definition of failure is that you've tried your best and still not succeeded. And to me, if I tried my best, then I have no regrets. It's really when I think I should have known better, where I didn't do my best and made a mistake, that I would then regret and think about. And that definitely happens a lot. I mean, every time we had, as an engineer, had an incident, I would think back, it's like, what could have done better? And this is part of our job, is that like post-mortem and thinking about what you could have done better. As a manager, anytime I get feedback from a report, or like, I wish, you've done this instead of that. I think about, I could have done better. But I don't tend to dwell on, I tend to try and use that energy to do better in the future than dwell on it. In terms of what keeps me up at night, a lot of things, but it's more about excitement for the future, or sometimes, being in marketing hub, in HubSpot, means that we need to be thinking about the future of marketing for scaling companies. And that is something that can keep me up at night, not out of worry, just out of making sure I'm getting it right. Like I need, you can't really just Google and say, okay, what was the future of marketing?
Yeah.
You're gonna find a HubSpot article first thing. So, and then who's coming up with that? So definitely we need to figure it out. And there's a lot of uncharted there. But that's what I love about my job. So I really enjoy that part.
Yeah. So it's the positives that's keeping you up at night, not the failures or anything in the past. And as you say, you learn from most of them.
Yeah.
Who would be your biggest inspiration, or has it changed over time?
I'm really inspired by Yamini Rangan, our CEO of HubSpot. She is an amazing woman. She is absolutely amazing. I'm very, very inspired by her. But generally, though, I am inspired by a lot of people in a lot of situations. So anytime I'm seeing someone deal with a tough situation and get to the other side, I'm inspired. Anytime I see someone deal with something, so I can, I'm more inspired by situations from people rather than idealizing one person in all of their aspects, if you know what I mean. Like I like to separate the person from the situation. I can still be inspired by someone, even if I don't know everything they've been up to. Yamini, though, is absolutely someone that anytime I've seen her, I've been inspired by her. So she is definitely a role model for me.
Great. We actually had Wendy Harris, who's the site lead of Gong, on our podcast, and Yamini is her mentor. So she commented on the podcast post. So I'll try my best to get her on, but I'm sure she's very, very busy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Yamini, she does an internal podcast for us, and it's something I really enjoy listening to, just about her journey. She's absolutely wonderful.
Brilliant. Is there anything you've read or watched that you feel has changed your life? Any book or even audiobook listened?
A lot, actually. One book, though, that it had a momentous change in my career. That is an old book, not even, it's not that, it's very well known, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It actually definitely changed me, absolutely. There's a Nadia before reading that book and a Nadia after reading that book. I was still trying to get out of the engineer. So I was an engineer just turning into management at the time. And I still thought, really, as an engineer, what I mean is, like, I was focusing on problems, not people. So I had a lot of rough edges at the time. I didn't really think of how my technical decisions were impacting customers or impacting people. I was thinking about systems. And that book was a awareness for me. It was like, I'm dealing with people. I'm not just dealing with machines here. And I need to be more considerate and just like really listen. And it was absolutely, to me, I do attribute to it my a shift in my thinking that actually accelerated my career growth at one point, just the shifting in that part. Now, obviously, I've read a lot of books that inspired me in many ways, but that book, just the timing and when I read it and the way it shifted my perspective definitely changed things. I remember my manager telling me a few months later, I don't know, Nadia, what you're doing, but somehow your trajectory just becomes steeper. I don't know, just whatever you're doing, keep doing. I was thinking to myself, it's shift mindset from that book.
It's the book, yeah. That book has really stood the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people misunderstand it and misuse it and think that, it's a lot about being authentic in your thing. It's people think it's just being nice to other people, and that's not my interpretation.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a person to just read something and just take it as is complete. To me, I take an interpretation,
Yeah.
and my interpretation of the book really works for me.
Yeah, fantastic book. What's the biggest risk you took and why did you take it?
So some people would tell you for me, I mean, at the time, picking computer science was considered a big risk. I remember when I put so after leaving cert, you put your choices of where you want to go. It's like because it's very competitive, so you might not get what you wanted. I had enough grades to get anything I wanted, and that was unheard of, to get medicine and you still go for something unknown at the time, computer science. And a lot of people thought that studying computer science meant that you'd know how to use a PC. So they would be telling me, you're wasting your time. Look, my kid just did a couple of months, course, and they know how to do it. Or they would tell me, just go into like a more legit thing. You can be a doctor and still know how to program. And like, why would I want to do something I don't enjoy versus something I enjoy? So yeah, both people thought I would have made a mistake. No.
Yeah, you definitely proved those people wrong now. So if you could hear one person on a podcast, or let's say come on to this podcast, who would you love to hear?
Oh, you totally should get Yamini if you can get her.
We'll try our best, yeah.
She would absolutely be amazing. I can't get enough of hearing her speak.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been great. Some great insight and a brilliant story. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here as well. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks.